Some actors hate me, I think, but I learned now something. I have to explain it in advance.
Welcome to Locarno Meets, a movie podcast brought to you by UBS from the Locarno Film Festival. Jessica Hausner is a unique and influential contemporary filmmaker. This year, she was chosen to lead the main jury and choose the winner of the Locarno Film Festival Pardo d'Oro. Jessica, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
I think it's fair to say that there's a regular motif in your work that's a critique of power structures. So it's vaguely ironic that you're here to head the jury. Are you going to rule it with an iron fist?
Definitely not. On the contrary, I think the fun about being in a jury is to listen to each other's opinion and to be respectful and to also understand what every person sees in a film, which can be very different.
I kind of wonder about when filmmakers sit on juries and they all walk out together having seen entirely different films, if it's a bit of a rude reminder for you and your work that people may leave seeing something you hadn't really contemplated.
No, absolutely. I think being on a jury is very interesting for me as a filmmaker. It teaches me exactly that. There is no the audience. There is only individuals, and sometimes I'm totally surprised what someone sees in my film, or being in a jury, what every person saw in the film.
Yeah, I mean, I think with your films in particular, I think people could walk out of something and say, oh, that was a comedy. And could also walk out of something saying, how dare you say that? That destroyed me. Are you attracted to that ambiguity?
Yes. Also personally, I think that is what makes a film interesting, that it's not sitting in the middle of just one genre or one log line, but that you have to sort of find your way through it. I think that makes a film interesting because then it stays with you a little longer because it makes you think.
Do you, on the journey towards making these films, do you find yourself reimagining what you think the film is as well?
I mean,
much as two people may walk out of the film with different feelings and may even go back and see it another time and leave with different feelings again. Yeah. Do you find that you have multiple feelings about your films during the process?
During the process, I focus on keeping, I focus on not getting lost because there is so many things that change your initial idea through the process of making a film. So every evening after the shooting, for example, I sit in my room and I try to remember, why did I want to make that film? What is the basic core part of it? So I try to keep that thin red line throughout all the scenes and all the events that happen. But when the film is finished, then I also see the film differently from time to time. For example, if a couple of years have passed, I have a different perspective on what I did 10 years ago.
And the larger the production, is it harder to keep the thin red line?
The larger? No, I think it depends. Also for me, it's easier if my collaborators are those collaborators that I know well. So I work with the same DOP and costume designer and editor since a couple of films. And this makes it easier for me to focus on the thin red line because they understand and they carry it with me and they try to sort of...
keep you honest.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
If you're interested in ambiguous storytelling, conversely, the form of your films is very, very specific and very intentional. The role of colour, for example, is incredibly specific. I wonder at what point during, the generation of a film in your mind do you start considering colour palettes or things like that?
I would say that the one thing is what is being told and the other thing is how it's being told. And when I have written the script, I sit back and I sort of take on another phase, and then I'm being the director, and then I just think, okay, interesting script, how would I want to visualize it? And that's when the colors come in quite early. So the costume designer is my sister Tanja Hausner.
Oh, well, she's amazing.
Yes, she is. And she's one of the first persons that I discuss the script with. And sometimes it's her who has the first visual ideas. She brings some photos, or we look at images, art, and different fashion images, whatever. And then we start to discuss about the colors and the style.
And how about the sets? I mean, I know that you storyboard a lot. Do you have then in your mind, can you imagine, I don't know, this church is going to look like XYZ from day one, or is that all come through location scouting and building sets and things?
I used to draw the storyboard before we go to location scout, because I wanted to make sure that my visual storytelling does not get influenced by reality, because why would I want to change my mise en scène just because a room looks like the way it looks? My storyboarding has to follow the inner emotional track. Mm-hmm. So normally I draw the storyboard before we look for the locations. But for example, with Club Zero, we needed a school. Every scene was in that school, and I thought it's too complicated if then I have to shoot in 5 different locations because of my storyboard. So we did the location scouting earlier.
And how about casting? Because you clearly build as I said, a very specific prism and set, mise en scène, where the film will take place. Is it difficult to find people who can fit into that already conceived of reality?
No, because this is something I leave quite open. If you would read my scripts, you would ask me, but who is that main character? We don't know her. Yeah, exactly. So it's a little bit open for an actor, actress to fill it up, to be someone in that role. And when I do the casting, I think my casting is a little bit as if it was non-professional actors. I do a very long casting until I find the person that I think is right for the role and that brings it to life.
So what's in that process? Is it just hours and hours of... It's not improv, right?
No, I mostly try out the scenes from the script.
Gotcha.
With the dialogues, and then I immediately see if something is happening that intrigues me or not.
And I mean, you're quite specific about your scripts, right? You know, you're not a big fan of people improvising. Is that a challenge for some actors?
Yes. Some actors hate me, I think, but I learned now something. I have to explain it in advance. Since my last 2 films, I understand that I have to prepare the actors for this sort of work, because the shots are very long that we do, so they need to know all the dialogues of a whole scene. And sometimes we shoot the whole scene in one shot, and then we repeat it 35 times. This can be very annoying, and if you're not used to it, you think, where am I? And so I have to explain a little bit how I work and what the method is and what the result is. So
how, I mean, without wanting to ask you the secret sauce, you know, how do you explain that result?
So that's different. It depends on the actor. Sometimes I show a scene that we already shot. This can help a lot if an actor is not in the scene herself or himself, and I say, oh, look, that's what we shot yesterday. That's what it looks like. Sometimes I invite them to look at the video combo, but some actors don't know, it's not good for them to do that. So then I do it differently. I try to talk about it, or I show them other films or films that I did before.
Sure. So it's almost an understanding of a tone.
Yes. A tone and also the process.
Okay. You know, I've read you talking about kind of how you have slightly odd dialogue patterns, which can be a difficulty for some actors. It's something that I didn't realize because I'm a terrible monolingual British person until you made Little Joe. But I wondered if changing language that you write in has affected how you structure and think about dialogue.
What I noticed is that if I translate from German language to another language, the film becomes more universal. I remember with my film Lourdes, I had written it in German language, then we translated it to French. The co-writer was a French writer. And suddenly we noticed that some of the jokes didn't work anymore because it was too local. It was a sort of tone of joke or humor that was Austrian. But for French people, they thought, oh, that's stupid. What are they? So it didn't work. So we had to change even the humor. That was very interesting for me. And the same happened with Little Joe and Club Zero. But I have the feeling that British humor is very close to the Austrian humor. It's dark, dry, and weird.
That is true. That is what we are. And then, with kind of Club Zero, that has a much more American, almost satirical flavor with some of the dialogue, where there's I don't want to say cliches, but characters lean into well-worn phrases, which are almost kind of they've been so smoothed out. There's no meaning in them anymore. Was that kind of
I do that quite often. I also did it in my previous films. Some of the dialogues don't make sense, or you understand that someone says something just because everyone says it. This is a very important part of my filmmaking, because what I do is I show how not original we are, that we are basically human beings who follow the majority most of the cases. Sometimes we don't, and then it's dangerous. This is also an important part of my storytelling. Those who don't follow the rules or the majority are in danger.
With that, as we're talking about those well-worn phrases, as an English guy, it reminded me of Harold Pinter's writing or something like that. And another similarity is, take Lord, for example, your use of silence. And in that film, it's really quite devastating. And while quite a lot of that, a lot of your work feels elevated and very subjective, the moments of silence feel like they reground the audience. Is that what you're trying to do with this kind of long scenes?
Well, I definitely don't try to tell the story through the dialogue, but through the image. And maybe that's what you're saying, because sometimes we have these real-time scenes. They could be much shorter, but they're not, because I want us to feel how a real minute feels. I can't do it too often because then it's boring, but sometimes it's possible to. It feels as if the time was being stretched, but it's just the real time, and I find it very interesting because that's what it is. My life is not a series of interesting events. My life is very much about washing laundry, going to the shop, and cooking. It's not all so interesting.
Clearly, you're somebody who does a lot of research. Am I right in thinking that you have large book collections of books kind of for each different film that you've made?
Yeah.
So walk me through it. Tell me, what kind of books did you get for Club Zero?
For Club Zero, I did research on cults, very much also nutrition. Mm-hmm. I have very many books on nutrition now.
And there's a clear crossover between the two fields.
Yes. And also about extreme ideas about nutrition. So that was an interesting research for me to do, but also a lot manipulation of groups, of masses of groups. There's a whole psychology on that, which is interesting, how you lose your own opinion when you're in dissolving into a group.
That's like the Stanford prison experiment or that type of thing.
Things like that, yes. It's a very interesting psychological thing.
Do you do the research? Do you find that your art necessarily benefits from the greater research you do, or is there a sense of responsibility to the topic to really know that you've got your head around it?
It's more to really find exactly the right details also. Like when I made my film Amour Fou, I used the history, so there are historical personalities, Heinrich von Kleist and Henriette Vogel, who were the role models for the characters in my film. So I had to do a lot of historical research, but I never planned to be truthful to the history. This is, I think, not possible because none of us were there. I always try to find those details that make my argument believable and plausible.
It feels to me like you're consistently quite suspicious of people who come along and seem to say they've got the solution, that there's a big answer. Is that, I don't know, is that a problem you see in today's world that you're trying to reflect?
I think the general thing is that we always, I think all human beings would like to have easy solutions. Because the problem is we take it all very seriously, and then in the end we suddenly die, and it doesn't really make sense. So we would all prefer to have a life after death, or to know what makes sense and to have a meaning.
Yeah.
But we can't. And I think in previous times there were the bigger religions, they gave us answers, and the difference is only that nowadays it's smaller groups of believers. Probably through the internet or social media, whatever, I don't know, it changed a little bit, that there is not the big religion, but small groups of very strong believers.
And, you know, when you sit down and you're kind of getting an idea together, is it like a big thematic idea that you're drawn to? Are you like, I want to do something about science now, or I want to do something about religion now? Or is it, well, what type of, how do you land on a subject? Or is it a specific plot that comes into you?
I normally start from a plot idea. A very short sort of log line of a plot where there is something that is weird or interesting. And then from that beginning, I start to investigate and to collect stories, to do some research, to think more about it. And then if that idea develops well and sort of develops roots in a way, then I continue it. But sometimes an idea is a flop, and after 3 weeks I drop.
So how often are you casting aside log lines?
So when a film is getting finished, like during the editing process, I already think about a new film, a new project. And that's the time when I collect and drop.
And do the ideas just, I'm sorry to bang on about it, but it's very interesting to me how people choose how to spend years of their life, you know? And is it the kind of thing where, I don't know, you're doing the washing up or you're going for a run and suddenly you're like, oh, wait, that's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's constantly, it's a constant inner monologue. I'm also taking notes a lot.
And, you know, over your career, how do you think you've now changed as an artist? Have you become more confident, or was there the great arrogance of youth?
That's difficult to say, because on the one hand, I am more confident. I think that I can, in a way, make an interesting film out of an idea that I have. Mm-hmm. So I have less doubts about my ability to make that film interesting. But on the other hand, when I make the film, I know so many things can go wrong that I'm much more worried than I used to be when I started to be a filmmaker.
And now, do you think it's fair to say that there's more music and color in your films as you've been going on? Is that a resource thing, or just something that maybe they're forms that you've become better at using?
Yes, at some point, it is about attracting the audience. And the weirder the story, the more attractive other things have to be in the film. So if the music is intriguing or the colors are interesting, it's also, I dress up my film a little bit, like flowers use interesting colors so that they are liked, or they smell nice so that they get the bees to attract. I do the same thing. I try to find elements in my films that don't corrupt my weird storytelling, but that are interesting and seductive and attractive.
And do you have conscious influences anymore? Or is that more the type of thing you get when you're starting out and you're taking a little bit from here and there, but now you have a certain style, and I don't know, or are you always influenced by new art?
Always influenced by new art. I am influenced by art. This is something I can say, that I love to go to exhibitions and see art, because this inspires me most, but also literature.
Other cinema?
Also, yes, of course. I get inspired also by experimental films a lot.
Sure.
So, for example, Maya Deren is one of my sources of inspiration. I love her films, and sometimes I still take new ideas from there.
And so, look, you're the head of the jury. Are you going to sit down with your fellow jurors and say, wait, hold on, what makes a good film? Beforehand, so you all kind of agree?
Yes, we already did that.
Oh,
I
right,
invited
okay.
everybody to say what they think makes a good film, or what criteria they have when they judge a film.
And what did you say?
I said that I appreciate films that maybe don't have that immediate strong emotional impact, because in a whole selection of a festival, of course, the louder films have the bigger impact, and also on me as a jury member. So what is important for me is to not oversee or overlook a film that does not shout so loud, but may have another interesting story or perspective or voice.
Well, I'm sure there'll be lots of good stuff at Locarno. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you too.